Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Prepare for that great crisis that's coming and how to take advantage of it. Let's get started. A lot of bad news. But remember, and I always want to reiterate this every week, I'm the kind of person I'd rather be prepared and I would want to know what's coming rather than not know, because obviously by knowing, you're able to prepare and do well. One of the advantages of quote unquote bad times is that it's one of the best times to literally get rich. During the Great Depression in 1929, 1930s, it was one of the best times to make money. So if you're able to prepare yourself the right way, obviously this is going to be one of the best times in the history, not only of our generation, but the world, to be able to go ahead and do really well. Overall for the week, we didn't have a bunch of economic news other than just, the fear of the economic situation that we're walking into and the economic crisis. Obviously, we have the situation with the energy in Europe. They're not going to be doing too well. So that kind of hovering over the minds of everybody and investors is really what kind of brought all the markets down. Overall, for the markets in the US, mostly negative. The only one that was positive was the Dow. Of the major indexes, the NASDAQ fell to its lowest level in 2 years. Canadian market was also negative. Euro markets were mixed. The FTSE in London was the most negative of all. And here reviewing the numbers, I believe it was the DAX, which was the most positive of them all as well. Latin America, mostly lower. Africa and the Middle East, mixed. Saudi Arabia, negative almost 3% there, mostly negative of all. And then in the far east, we have the Hang Seng in Hong Kong at 6.94% negative, which was the most negative this week. Bitcoin, not a ton of news in the Bitcoin space so far this week, other than the fact that Bitcoin and most of the other Bitcoins went down for the week. Bitcoin was down 1.68% to 19,506. For the year 2022, it's down almost 60%, while year over year, Bitcoin is down 69.30%. With that dominating sentiment on Monday and Tuesday and throughout the week of kind of the not so good situation that we're walking into economically. Obviously, this means that a lot of people are going to consume less, because obviously during a recession or bad times, people spend less money. They want to conserve, they want to save money, they don't go out and spend. And remember that the majority of the economies around the world, even the US, which is almost 70% consumer spending, if people stop spending money, the economy just goes down by a lot. So because of that reason, crude just cratered. The US crude went down over 8% to 85.61, while Brent, which is the international crude, went down 6.86% to 91.63. In the European news, there was a suffering a quote unquote malfunction, right? We'll get conspiracy Marcello in here. A malfunction to the refinery in Europe, in the Netherlands. So now they're going to have an even bigger problem when it comes to their energy situation, especially with their supply in Northwest Europe. And one of the things I found really interesting was, since they are having an energy problem, Germany is burning 800 million COVID masks for heat. They spent $5.6 billion on the masks. They're calling it thermal recycling. But in reality, they're really just burning trash, which, if you didn't know, is not good for the environment, guys. I mean, come on. In Poland, they removed the air quality rules to burn actual trash. So they're allowing their own citizens to literally burn their own trash and coal to be able to stay warm in the winter. If you guys didn't know, and I think most of you guys don't know, in a lot of the houses back in the day, they literally had their own coal or oil furnaces in the basements of the homes. That's what they literally use for energy. In Mississippi, the river of Mississippi is at its lowest point as going back to 1988. There are now 1,700 barges that are literally stuck because there's just little streams going through the right and left side of the river. And that's a really big problem, because that's a very important waterway, especially in the United States, not only for water, but for transportation. And the USDA, here comes Conspiracy Marcello, and the USDA, for some reason, wants everybody to register their vegetable gardens for a national database. Now, why the hell would they want to do that? Precious metals, due to the dollar, down a lot as well. Gold went down by over 3% to 1646, while silver is down over 9%, 9.95 to be exact, at 1839. Financial and banking news, there's been a 45% increase in the interest payments on the national debt, which could hit $580 billion this year. According to the new debt, not the new debt, but the new budget that was planned in 2023, of the 1.6 trillion in discretionary spending, that can now actually be almost a third of that 1.6 trillion, a third is now going to be just interest payment on the debt. So we're now getting to the point where we're reaching that critical level where we're just not going to be able to sustain this any longer. And the government just continues to print even more and more money because, you know, Ukraine needs the weapons, obviously, right? Mortgage rates at a 20-year high at 6.92. That has caused annual home sales to slump by 39%. In other news in regards to inflation, the Social Security beneficiaries can expect an 8.7% boost in 2023. According to CNBC, this is the biggest cost of living adjustment in 40 years. That tells you that, you know, the normal folks are not having a good time dealing with the inflation. Thailand is doing really well on the weak baht. Obviously, the United States dollars, the baht is the Thailand currency, by the way. The US dollar is up record against all major currencies. And since Thailand is a huge tourism hub, a lot of people make it cheaper for them to visit with a stronger dollar. And it also stimulates other parts of the economy because it makes their products cheaper because the money is a lot cheaper compared to the dollar. Japan's yen as well on Friday fell to a 32-year low against the dollar. South Korea's central bank raised by 50 basis points. They're now at 3%. And their inflation rate now is at 5.6% in September. So all the central banks are continuing to raise their interest rates to be able to go ahead and try and rein in inflation. US CPI, which is the consumer price inflation, has gone up 0.4% to 8.2%, which is higher than expectations. Still higher than where they wanted to be. And the core inflation, which basically is the normal inflation with the volatile items like fuel, energy, and food taken out, was 6.6%, which is the highest 12-month gain in 40 years since August 1992. So we're doing awesome. Used car prices are starting to come down as well. They were going up at one point during the pandemic at 10% a month, but they're finally starting to come down as well. China CPI is at 2.8% at its fastest rate since April 2020. And the tech stocks overall in China are down by 20% so far this year. Remember that a downtrend or a down market is essentially considered about 20% territory. Not a lot of political news and economic news. Eurozone industrial production soared in August way beyond expectations, which is a surprise because a lot of companies don't tend to invest money when they're expecting a recession on the horizon. In corporate news and a better idea of what inflation is actually at, PepsiCo, which is a company that is absolutely massive, first of all, but also produces quite a bit of food items, let's call it, with that require a lot of materials. For example, Doritos bags, right? Chips, the cans for Pepsis. They have to buy a lot of this material. They're increasing on average their product prices by 17% year over year. So the government is telling us that the inflation is only at 8.6%, but there's a company that relies on buying materials that they're increasing their prices by 17%. So what does that tell you what the actual inflation rate is actually at? And one more thing on top of that, has your salary gone up by 20% this year? 17%? No? 5%? 4%? 3%? Think about that. Domino's Pizza went up by over 10% after they reported better than expected earnings in Q3. And shares of the biggest semiconductor manufacturing company in the world in Taiwan, their Q3 net profits went up by over 80%. Their net income rose to $281 billion. Excuse me, Taiwan dollars. So that works out to be 8.81 billion US. Rivian went down by quite a bit after they recalled nearly all vehicles because the driver is apparently could lose all steering control. And Kroger, which is the largest supermarket operator in the US, announced a deal to buy They say they're going to announce the deal to buy Albertsons. Kroger is nearly 2,800 stores, Albertsons at 2,200, and Kroger is only second in revenue to Walmart when it comes to supermarkets. Royal Mail is giving on Friday a plan to cut 6,000 jobs by next summer to be able to go ahead and shave their operating loss of 219 million pounds that they had. They're deciding a negative impact from a strike, but it's probably a lot more than that. And in technology, 4 astronauts from SpaceX that went into space 6 months ago are back now. They launched from Florida. And international events after the bridge strike in Ukraine the bridge strike in Russia from Ukraine. Russia launched an absolute barrage of missile weapons, which led to Zelensky wanting to urge us to give him a lot more weapons to be able to have a defense in regards to Russia. So that seems, unfortunately, like the situation is continuing to escalate. And protesters across Iran defied a nearly month-long crackdown after the protests continue. After Amini, which is a 22-year-old woman in the country's Kurdish region, died in September while being held for improper attire. So that's continuing to go on as well. France now is suffering from their 8th wave of the pandemic. Looks like this probably is never going to go away. And in unusual facts this week, one of Van Gogh's most famous sunflower paintings was deflowered after one of the 2 climate activists threw cans of what appeared to be tomato soup on the painting. Like, can you protest on the street and maybe not ruin, historical pieces of art? Maybe. Or you should go protest in Germany. They're letting people, and Poland, they're letting people burn trash. That's horrible for the environment. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.